This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, and I'm joined by a new friend out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, Russ Gregg, who is the founder and head of school of Hope Academy, of course, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he's pretty happy right now. The Vikings are doing great as we record this, podcast. So he's got a big smile on his face, but also because he's doing some really cool things at Hope Academy. And we're going to dive into a whole bunch of those today. And we're actually going to make this into two separate episodes. So this first one's going to be diving into Hope Academy and their story and Russ's story and how they kind of became Hope Academy. But then we're also going to do a second episode you guys will get to listen to next week, which is all about fundraising, because something that you'll hear about from Hope Academy is how they're specifically structured is so unique, and I love it. It's kind of like flipped on its end, which he'll dive into that here in today's episode. But we're going to dive into fundraising and some of the different things that they've done, but that'll be in next week's episode, so make sure you tune back in for that one. But for today's episode, I always don't want to take too much thunder away from our guests. I do want to pass it off to them to introduce themselves first. So, Russ, welcome to the podcast today, sir.
Thanks, Mitchell.
It's going to be a blast, man. So I always start with this, and I've never been to Minnesota. Obviously, that means I've never been to Minneapolis. So I start with the same question that you weren't ready for, but here we go. So if I was to ever visit Minneapolis, Minnesota, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Oh, man, you didn't give me any prep time for that.
It's going to be good. It's raw now. Here we go.
Eat this and what was the second one?
Eat this and do this to experience
eat this and do this. Oh, man, eat this. What is the, let's see. Well, there's a woman, Ann Kim, who's been on the Netflix show on famous chefs. And so she has a pizza place here, but she grew up as a Korean. And so she put kimchi on pizza and became a James Beard award-winning chef. And so I'd say, go to her pizza place and try something like that, which I'm sure you've never had that.
Nope.
And let's see, what would you need to do? I would say Minneapolis. The name Minneapolis means city of lakes. And so, as you know, in the state, there are 10,000 lakes. And I'd say go for a drive around some of the lakes that are here in the city of Minneapolis. There's a chain of 4 or 5 lakes right here in the city. Some of the most beautiful area of the city.
Okay. Are they swimmable lakes? Obviously, in the summer,
They are. They are indeed, and ice skateable in the winter.
Even better. All right. I love that. So for Minneapolis, since I've never been, is there a food that Minneapolis or even just Minnesota in general is kind of known for, a specific type of food?
It's a lot of Scandinavian folks. So not really, nothing that comes to mind in terms of food that's you could only get here, I don't think.
Okay. Well, and they're not known for any sports teams either. So there's
you rascal. Wow. Ouch.
I mean, only unless there was a Super Bowl winning team, but they haven't had that yet either. So maybe no. As I say this as a horrible Bears fan that we haven't won since the 80s, it's pretty bad right now. So I digress. I love the rivalry between Vikings and Bears and all that fun stuff. So let's dive in. Let's have some fun today on this episode. I would love to, let's get a little bit of background on you first, as before we dive into Hope Academy, which I know your story will of course bleed into Hope Academy. So let's get a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. You know, the one of the best places to start with is 33 years ago, my wife Phyllis and I were looking to buy our first home in Minneapolis, and somebody said to us, if as followers of Jesus who are called to be the light of the world, what part of the city was most in need of the light of the gospel? You should think about moving in there. Well, there's one neighborhood in our city that nobody wants to live in, and it's called the Phillips neighborhood. And this is the neighborhood that George Floyd was murdered in
Okay.
a number of years ago. And it it rose to the top of our list for two main reasons. It had the highest concentration of poverty of any neighborhood in the state, and it had the crime and violence that often go with those kinds of neighborhoods. And so when I told my dad that we were going to buy a house here in Phillips, he said, "Russ, you're an idiot." He said, "Your house is your greatest investment, and the value of your investment is going to tank." I said to him, "But Dad, what if I'm not investing for 70 years? What if I was investing for 70 million years?" He says, "What are you talking about?" And he didn't get that. But so we moved into this Phillips neighborhood 33 years ago. And when you move into a neighborhood, something strange happens. Your neighbor's problems become your problems in a different sort of way. And what I didn't realize is that my neighborhood was experiencing an education crisis. That my neighbors were getting, in some ways, some of the worst education in the whole country. And what was so strange is because Minnesota prides itself on having the highest ACT college entrance scores in the whole country. So in the state with the highest achievement, there existed some of the lowest academic achievement in the same context. And so Minnesota actually leads the whole country in the size of the achievement gap between white students and students of color. And what that meant was that for my neighbors here, that less than half of them were going to graduate from high school. And the ones that did graduate could only read at an 8th grade level at graduation. And and so we're convinced that if we were going to love our neighbor as ourselves, that we needed to do something about that problem. And in the fall of 2000, we started Hope Academy, a school for the children who are experiencing some of the most horrific educational results of anywhere in the country.
Man, and then it's 20. So this next year will be 25 years then.
You know, this is our 25th year. Yeah, we're in the middle of our 25th year. That's right.
Well, I'm really glad we're having a podcast then. I feel like that's even makes it more fun. It's exciting.
Last week we had our 25th anniversary gala where we celebrated what God's done over those 25 years. But when we started in September 1st of 2000, we started with 3 teachers and 35 students in grades K1 and 2. And today we're serving 700 inner city youth, grades K to 12.
And how many staff now?
Well, there's over 150 people on the payroll.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, obviously, happy anniversary, birthday, however you want to say it, for the 25 years.
Yeah,
that is super exciting. And I know that you when you were born and you were a kid, you told your mom, I want to start a school one day in Minneapolis and do this really thing called Hope Academy. I know that's exactly how it happened. You were raised wanting to be an educator your entire life, right, Russ?
Right. Well, the thing that I thought that got me off the hook from having to do this was that I'm not an educator by training or background. I've never taught in a classroom. And so I thought that let me off of God's hook. It turns out what he was looking for was actually somebody who would trust him and believe his promises and obey him and take the step of faith to do this. So that was the qualification. But yeah, it proves the fact that God can use anybody to accomplish his purposes.
I love that. Amen. And so what were you doing before the year 2000 when you first moved in the 90s, you moved into the house in Phillips?
Yeah. So I was the development director at the Christian school that my kids were attending in the wealthiest neighborhood in the city.
And then you lived in Phillips.
I lived in Phillips, right?
Okay. And so,
Yep.
how far from Phillips is
About
this
10
school?
miles.
Okay.
About 10 miles. Yeah. So morning after morning, I would put my kids in the back seat of the car, and as I'm driving them across town to their school, I'd have to drive right past my neighbors who were waiting to catch the bus to what were arguably some of the worst schools in the country. And as I would be driving on past, Mitchell, I would often pray for them and say, Lord, would you please tell somebody to do something about this problem? And I can imagine that God must have laughed and said, well, there is this one guy named Russ, and he lives right there in the midst of this, and he sees the injustice of this day after day. But Russ has got two big problems, Mitchell. He's got a hard head, and what's worse, he's got a hard heart. And so I disobeyed God for 8 years, and kept driving past my neighbor out of unbelief that God could provide for such a school like this.
Man. And now look what he was able to do and what you were able to do with the resources and things that he's given you, which is awesome.
Yeah, it actually happened on a Sunday morning in September of '99 when I was here listening to a sermon about heaven. And at the conclusion, the pastor said, if this is really true, that for ages and ages and ages, we're going to inherit all things, what should you do with the 70 years that you've got here on the planet? And he said, I encourage you to venture something for God that's a little bit crazy. And as soon as I heard the word crazy, I almost jumped out of the pew and said, that's it for me, a non-educator, to start a school in the most difficult place in our city would be crazy. And yet I knew that God was calling me to do that. And so the next day, the Monday, I walked into my boss's office and I quit my job. I said, Steve, I'm quitting to start. And he said, well, are you going to do this like at the end of the school year? I said, no, today, because I've got only 11 months to get everything together to start school the following fall.
Wow, obviously God just wants people to be faithful and to take that next step and see what you can do. And you reminded me of this thing. I actually haven't even talked about this in well over 5 years. This hypothetical, unbiblical question that I want to ask you, because it's you reminded me of it when you're talking about driving by them in the mornings and the other neighbors are getting on the bus. It's going like, what are the things that God has been trying to tell us to do that we have missed out on because we have had a hard head, or we just like, no, that can't be me. It must be somebody else. Call somebody else, God, because I don't want to do that. So the hypothetical, unbiblical, very clear here, everybody who's listening, a question is like, okay, when you get to heaven one day, there's all these boxes, and there's a box that has each of our names on it. And Russ gets to heaven, and Mitchell gets to heaven, and God's like, hey, here's this box for you. And I was like, oh, great, thank you, God. And he goes, inside the box is everything that you missed out on because you didn't follow what I told you to do, and all the blessings and all that. Do you open, but you get to choose if you get to open the box or not. Like, do you want to see all what you missed out on and what you don't? So Russ, just out of funny curiosity, would you open the box to see what you missed out on, that you like all these years of like, oh, I should have done that thing. I should have done that thing.
I'd be too curious not to. But
me too. I'm the same.
It's interesting, Mitchell, because after that Sunday morning sermon, that led to the worst night of my life. A night of wrestling with God all night long, where I gave him all my list of reasons why I shouldn't do this. And there was one point in the night where I felt as if God was saying, Russ, if you're not ready and willing to trust me and do this thing with me, I'm ready to move on and find somebody else who will. And the idea of me sitting on the sidelines watching somebody else do this for my neighbors was more than I could bear. And so, like I said, in fear, great fear and trembling, the next morning, I quit my job and took my baby step of faith. And guess what? In the following 11 months, all those things that I didn't have, of a building and teachers and students and financial support, God provided all of those things over the next 11 months so that we could start school.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. Amen. I love it. So let's dive in then to Hope Academy itself. Those that are listening, they're like, okay, sounds like a great story. There's a school now in Minneapolis that's doing some cool things, but let's dive into real quick. What is Hope Academy before we dive into the couple questions I have for you for this episode? But what is Hope Academy right now for you guys?
Yeah. One way to say it is that it's Hope Academy is giving the best education there is to those that need it the most.
I like that.
Right. So typically, most Christian schools are funded on a model where 90% of the costs are paid for by parent tuitions. And then those schools fundraise the other 10% from grandparents and alumni. And at Hope Academy, we practice what we call the kingdom flip. And so we believe it's necessary for every family to have skin in the game. And so there's a sliding scale tuition based on a family's ability to pay. But the total of parent tuition accounts for 10% of the costs. And then we partner every single student up with a sponsor who comes alongside that student and says, I'll contribute the other 90% to make this school affordable for everybody.
I love that.
And so it's been an amazing ride to see God raise up over 500 of those sponsors who've come alongside our students to make Hope Academy affordable for the poorest of the poor in our city.
I love it. That's so awesome. So obviously with this, you start the school, obviously you're 25 years in now. You have had, and I'm sure you still continue to have, some challenges that pop up. So, when we have these episodes, we love to have the school leaders listening and hearing from other schools of what are they going through and how are they combating those challenges? And so even with y'all's model and what you guys are doing, obviously there's going to be still challenges. I'd love to hear some of those that you're experiencing right now and how you're currently combating those.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges is giving into what former President Bush called the soft bigotry of low expectations for inner city youth, right? The idea that there's a suburban standard of education and an urban standard of education. And so that's a pretty prevalent mindset. And it's probably something that I have to work at combating almost on a monthly basis. And so what does that mean then to expect great things of inner city families? Well, at Hope, it means beginning in fourth grade, teaching Latin to students for 5 years. It means in the upper school, teaching the great books. So teaching a classical program, educational program. So they're reading the Odyssey and the Iliad. They're reading Shakespeare. They're reading Jane Austen and that. It means, in a place with just massive educational failure. I mean, we have schools, Mitchell, here in Minneapolis, where there is not a single student in the school who is reading at grade level.
Wow!
If you can imagine that. So in a place like that, right? We begin to start to teach algebraic concepts in third grade, so that that all of our students can do algebra as 8th graders and do a year of calculus as seniors, right?
Wow.
And so our aim is that where we've got students who are coming to us 2 or 3 grade levels behind where they should be, that they're all college ready when they finish. And so one of the challenges is then is not giving into those ideas to say, well, these are students from homes of poverty, and therefore we should lower our expectations for them, not only in terms of academic expectations, but behavior expectations and all the rest. And of course, what we've seen is that when, I believe that low expectations are a cruel and unusual punishment. And so when you raise those expectations, by God's grace, people rise to those. And so finding teachers that are not going to give in to those low expectations, but that are dynamic, mission-driven teachers who expect the most from their students is one of the challenges that we've got. Another big one is how to engage and involve inner city parents in the education of their children. So increasingly, schools are more and more marginalizing parents, and even in some ways thinking of them as obstacles in the education of their own children. We believe that God has made teachers or parents to be their child's first and most important teachers. Mm-hmm. So how do we change that? How do we turn that on its head? In October, we cancel school for 3 days, and all of our teachers go out and do a home visit with every single family in their classroom. So we go to 350 homes over 3 days, from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, to build a relationship, a friendship with every family in the school. And last June, I went to a graduation open house, and the person had a display table of things that were important to her, and on one of them she had pictures, 13 pictures of her and her teacher at their home visit every single year that she had kept. That it meant that much to her and to their family. Another thing we do to engage those parents in that is twice a year we have something called Parent Involvement Day, where we require every parent to come to school on a Saturday with their kids from 9 until noon. Every parent is required to come to school for a half day. And we spend the first hour and a half doing a workshop, a capacity building workshop with the parents, and then the second part they get to go into those classrooms and be with their kids to see with their own eyes what remarkable Christ-centered education is like, so they come to treasure it and value it and support it. And then maybe a third challenge is how do you hold people accountable for their responsibilities? Accountability has gotten to be a really dirty word, hasn't it? Yeah. People avoid it at all costs, and yet we know that all of the most successful people in the world invite accountability into their lives, right? They all are honest enough to know that they're weak and that we need accountability. So what does that mean here at Hope? Well, here in this Phillips neighborhood, only 15% of parents in the public school attend their child's parent-teacher conference. Here at Hope, it's 97% on the day of, and then the other 3% get done the following week. Well, why is that? Because here at Hope is that if you don't make up your conference within a week, if you've missed it, you have to keep your child at home until you do get it scheduled. Wow. Right? And we do the same with students. So if you're in the upper school and you're on academic probation and there was an important assignment and you've missed it, we say, don't plan on going home after school, but plan to attend the academic support center and work on it until you do get it done, right? And so you develop these habits of the heart that set you up for a lifetime of success. So one of the things that's unique about Hope Academy is that we actually have a department of family ministry, right? People that full-time that are coming alongside our parents to help them succeed in supporting their child's success at school.
That's awesome. My goodness. So challenges, but are also there. You guys are combating them very, very well from what I can tell, which I love. So I feel like that is then the perfect Russ, like the perfect segue into like what's going really, really good. Obviously, all these things you did a great job just sharing. Hey, these are challenges, but with those challenges, things are going good because of how you're approaching those. Are there some cool wins to share? I'm sure there's a lot. Obviously, I'm sure there's a ton. But what are some of the wins that you can think of that's going really well?
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the beauties of being a K to 12 school is that we can play the long game. And so at our 25th anniversary celebration last week, we had a panel discussion of three of our graduates. One of those students, Eleazar, when when he was in fourth grade, he was in the fifth percentile for reading, right?
Wow.
So, but by working right, he ended up graduating from Hope Academy and going on to post secondary education. Now he's on a at one of the big dealerships in town. He works on the diagnostic team there at the dealership. We've got the so many opportunities are being opened to students as they graduate from Hope, because they've got both the virtuous character, right, and then they've got the intellectual capacity to be leaders. Another person on the panel last week was Michael, and Michael, after graduating from Hope, went to Southern in university, and then came back now and is teaching biology here at at Hope Academy.
Wow.
So somebody who was the a student here at Hope is now pouring into other students that need it just like she did.
Have you had any students from the 25 years that went through and then are also supporting the student?
We are just on the cusp of that. Exactly. That's next on the agenda, is to invite those people. So there were, I think, 4 or 5 of our graduates from that very first second grade class 25 years ago who were at the fundraising gala last week, and so I could imagine that there's going to be a growing number who are going to start to invest in other students like someone did in them.
The full circle, that would be amazing, and I'm
Isn't
sure
it?
it'll come, and it's just going to build off of each other as the more and more years go by, which is
I hope
cool.
so. I
with
hope so.
with what you guys are doing, obviously, again, 25 years. Is there anything, if you could go back, you would have done maybe something a little bit different that you're looking back on 25 years going, oh man, I wish I had done this a little bit different. So the school leaders that are listening going, they've been doing this a long time, and maybe some blinders are on for things that they've not seen, but if they could go back and maybe change something. What are there any things that come to mind for you that maybe you would have tweaked or done a little bit different?
Well, the most obvious thing is I wouldn't have put God off for so long as I did, and I would have submitted earlier and gotten started earlier. Another thing was when we had our first 8th grade graduation class, we had to decide whether we were going to take the next step to do the high school, and my board said to me, Russ, do you know how expensive high school is? There's just, we can't do that. And so that very first group of 8th graders we had to send away. And but here, this was even worse, Mitchell, is that we were in a building that had a second floor of 14 completely ready to go classrooms, empty classrooms, 14 of them. And so that we wouldn't see the opportunity of those on a regular basis, we built a little wall at the base of the stairs going upstairs. Oh my goodness. If there was ever a let's go back to Egypt moment, that was it. And within 2 or 3 months, we realized that we had made a huge error, and we repented, and the following year started the high school. But So we had shrunk back out of unbelief, and didn't take the bold step of faith that would have been the best thing to do. So yeah, that would have been
Yeah.
a key misstep.
Hey, school success makers, just a really quick break to highlight one of our amazing sponsors, and that is ClassReach. Now, ClassReach supports schools of all sizes from application to graduation. Take charge of your school with ease, power, and mobility using ClassReach, the school management software administrators and teachers love using. You can get your free demo at classreach.com. That's classreach.com. They are amazing people, and they provide this amazing SIS software for you to keep track of your students' grades, communicating with families that are enrolled, and a whole bunch more. So again, check it all out on their website, classreach.com. They are awesome. All right, now back to the show. But you didn't try and get those students to come back for the sophomore year.
We didn't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
so it just started freshman the following year.
So last week at that gala, we had a young woman who was in that group, and when she said when Hope Academy didn't provide a 9th grade, she said, I wept and I wept and I wept. Oh, I felt so awful that because then she ended up having to go back into the public school things, and it turned out really difficult for her. So that was a sad thing to realize, that our lack of faith impacted her in that way. But
Man.
But God still triumphed in that, and she's become a beautiful young woman. She's got, I think, 5 kids, and is involved in a young life ministry and that.
All
so
right. Very good. Well, I heard a saying from a friend of mine like a month ago, and it said, "There's no such." Okay, make sure I don't make this horrible here. There's no such thing as a bad decision, because you make the right decision at the right time with the information at hand, type of thing. And so for like you guys, I don't know if this will even make sense for the situation, but you made the decision of like, your board thought about it, and had like the gut feeling of like, let's do this. And so at that moment, it was like the right decision maybe. And then you obviously, things come out later, and then you look back and go, like, no, that it wasn't. But at the moment you made the decision, it was like, it felt right, or it was the right decision. I don't know if that helped with what we were talking about at all, but
so then 2 years ago, we got a call from our next door neighbor. We're actually, our buildings are attached to one another. It was a regional eye hospital with 150,000 square feet. And they alerted us that they were going to be shutting the eye hospital down. And would we have an interest in that? And and so we had to ask the question: should we consider buying this eye hospital and renovating at a cost of $45 million in order to double the size of the school? And by God's grace, he led us, after a year of due diligence and counting the cost, to launch the launch the Hope Rising campaign to raise $45 million. And so we bought it and renovated it over the last year, and moved into that space this fall.
Wow, brand new. So this just happened. That's exciting.
Just happened. So we're now on a growth path to double the size of Hope Academy over the next 10 years. In terms of the number of students that we're serving.
We're gonna have a lot of fun on that fundraising episode. We're gonna dive into a lot of fun stuff. Do you guys then with Hope Academy, did you bring in any athletics or anything with it, or no?
We do have an athletics program. Absolutely. So we play soccer and football in the fall, and cross country, and then in the spring we do track and field and baseball.
And you guys are in the heart of
basketball, of course, in the winter.
Yeah. In the heart, you guys are in the heart of the city, though. So like, there's no field that you own in the back of the school, or is there?
Well, we are attached to a city park, and so the city maintains the playing field right next door to us with a playground and athletic field. there so they take care of it for us.
Wow. Is that where like home football games are and everything too?
That's where the home soccer games are. And then football wise, we partner with 4 other schools to do a joint team. And it just so happened that team had the Mr. Football, the state football player of the year. And so they won the state championship a couple of years ago.
Sweet. So your kids then got to be state champs then.
Got to be a part of that. That's right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. For a small school like ours, this opportunity to co-op with these other private schools has been a real gift to our students. We could never do a football team on our own of any substance. So that's been a great thing. Yeah, you might remember there was a player on the Gonzaga basketball team. This guy was so talented. He was both Mr. Football and Mr. Basketball for the state of Minnesota, Jalen Suggs, and he scored that game-winning shot that put Gonzaga into the Final Four, and then he jumped on top of the scorers table. You might remember that.
That's a few years ago, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay. And so he's a starting guard on the Orlando Magic now. And, so he didn't go to Hope, but he went to one of the schools that we co-op with, and that's how they got to play for the state championship.
That's awesome. What cool memories for your students. So that's so cool. Well, I've loved this episode. I want to make sure we keep it short and sweet for this part and learn about Hope Academy and what all you guys are a part of. And obviously, like I mentioned to everybody, we're going to do the next episode on fundraising, kind of diving into some of the things that Hope Academy is doing specifically that is helping them to run their school the way they're running it. So we'll end this episode with this question. Russ is if you were to share one piece of advice with the school leaders that are listening, I know you've shared already a good bit of those, but if you kind of pick one out of your head, what would that one piece of advice be?
One of my favorite ways to think about the work that we're doing in Christian education is that every day we're spreading a feast, a feast of the best Christ-centered education you can get anywhere in the world. And Jesus had something to say about giving a banquet, didn't he? He says, when you give a banquet, don't invite your friends and neighbors and relatives who can pay you back. He says, if you want real joy, he said, go and invite the poor, the lame, the broken, the blind, those that would never in their wildest dreams imagine that there was a place at the table for them. And then you'll have real joy. And so that's my word of advice, is that go for the joy and think about those in your city that would never dream that there was a place at your school for them, and then make it possible for them to be there.
I love it. Well, Russ, thank you for taking time to hop on this episode. I know we're going to talk here in just a little bit to record episode 2, but for this one, thank you obviously for what you're doing at Hope Academy. I love that you followed the calling of the Lord on your life to start Hope Academy 25 years ago. And so congrats again on 25 years, and looking forward to seeing what God's going to do with your school in the next 25 years. So thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Russ for taking time and being on the podcast today. I loved our conversation. I love what him and his team are doing over at Hope Academy. So I'm hoping today you were inspired and encouraged and got some ideas that you can take back to your school to make them better than they are right now, because we all have room for improvement. Our schools have room for improvement. So thank you for tuning into this podcast to learn new ways and new things that you can do to make your school better, which is then, of course, is making it better for your students and their families. Awesome trickle-down effect that you guys get to be a part of. So thank you for what you do. Before you guys go, of course, we have 3 free resources we want to make sure you guys are aware of and are getting a hold of. The first one is, of course, the podcast that you're listening to right now. Free episodes dropping every Monday. So keep tuning back, making sure you're subscribed. And if you haven't yet, we'll love a 5-star review if you're loving the content that we continue to put out. It really does mean a lot to the team and I. We put a lot of time and effort and resources into getting these out to you guys. So that would be awesome if you could. But make sure you're tuning back every Monday for the new episodes that drop. And then, of course, the School Success Report on our website. If you go to schoolsuccessmakers.com, in the top right-hand corner, there's a button you can sign up to get our School Success Report. That also goes out on Mondays with some different articles, blog post. The team has gathered some different things to put together for you guys to have one good email that you can get that has some different things that teach you and get you ready for an awesome week ahead. So make sure you're getting that. Last but not least, the Facebook group. We want to make sure you guys have community around you. That is so incredibly important in today's time. So go join the Facebook group, completely free, School Success Makers. I'm personally in there. I'd love to see you in there as well. Meet some local teachers and different people in the United States. I know there's some also ones abroad in there as well. But tune into there, ask questions, get to know other people, and make sure you got some community around you. That is incredibly important. All right. Well, that is all that I have for you guys today. So we'll be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.